Hello, my name is Tucker Johnson, and I am your host today as we all together experience Nimdzi Live, where we talk about the greatest in translation, localization, internationalization, culturalization, and all that fun stuff global companies need to delight their international customers, or at least not to piss them off too much. If you're not already subscribed to Nimdzi Live, either here on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever is your platform of choice, make sure to do that so that you can be first to be notified when we publish new industry research or when we come out with new events and live streams like what we're doing today. On this program, we like to invite guests who like to have fun and also have some value to add for our audience of globalization professionals. We're always eager to provide a platform to those with a good story or a good data set. So let us know if there are some topics you'd like covered or some guests that we should reach out to for future episodes. Before we get started here, I'd like to talk about a couple things that we've got going on here at Nimdzi Insights. Yesterday I was talking about all the cool stuff they're doing over at Multilingual Media with Multilingual Magazine, the new issue coming out. But right now I'd like to talk about Nimdzi Learning. If you haven't heard of Nimdzi Learning, this is the branch, I would say, of Nimdzi Insights that focuses on e-learnings. We have asynchronous e-learnings. We have custom workshops. We have in-person workshops, remote workshops. I've been trying to do recently what we call Workshop Wednesdays, where we do free public workshops for anybody who wants to join every Wednesday. But every Wednesday has turned into, every Wednesday that I have available, which hasn't been that often. But you can actually go check out some of the recordings of those if you'd like. Go over to our LinkedIn page at Nimdzi Live and check out the past events, and the recordings should be up there still. Also, we have a lot of events happening in the industry right now. Finally, events are starting to come back into full force. And by that, of course, I mean in-person events. If you want to know, if you want to be in the know on what's going on, go over to nimdzi.com/events. And we have this very useful events calendar coming up here. I see that we have the Translation Forum Russia is coming up. We have Texpo, I can't read that. DigiMarcon, Global Sake is always putting out good events. So I'll leave that to you, nimdzi.com/events. Use that to plan your future events for the next quarter or for the rest of the year. Before we get started here, a quick introduction to the platform. We're doing this on LinkedIn Live. We like LinkedIn Live because that's where most of our friends hang out here on LinkedIn, but we're also live streaming to you on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I believe today the recordings will be held on our YouTube channel, nimdzi.com. We just surpassed 1,000 subscribers, which doesn't sound like that much. We're not PewDiePie, but I think that's pretty cool. So go over and be subscriber number 1001 if you like, if you want to hear more about translation and localization on YouTube. Now, getting into today's topic and guest, we're going to be talking about global remote teams. And this all started, the reason we're talking about this today is it started with so many things to do here at Nimdzi with a client request. A client of ours, an enterprise client of ours, came to us and said, I need some data about remote teams, remote work, global dispersion in the language services industry. So we're going to be looking at two different things today. We're going to be looking at some research around remote work, and we're going to be looking at some research around global dispersion. Now, these are two separate but related things. So remote is simply, do teams allow for remote employees? And that could be, everyone's working from the same city, but they're working from home. Global dispersion is slightly different in that it's, do we have teams all over the world? And for time zone coverage, for market coverage, whatever it may be. But essentially, after the pandemic, companies that were reluctant to recruit outside of the city limits understood that it is totally feasible to do so, right? The pandemic hit, and companies that typically would have everybody sitting in an office said, oh my gosh, we have to go remote, just because that's where the market is going. So what we saw over the last 2 years is this proliferation of remote work and proliferation of globally dispersed teams. Now, as the pandemic is if not coming to an end, it is evolving, subsiding a little bit. What we're seeing is companies, leadership at companies, wrestling with this concept of, do we keep the remote teams or do we pull back to the way that we were doing it before? And today we're going to be speaking with a global staffing effort who is very well dressed in her Nimdzi hat, Angelica Perez. And now Angelica Perez is the managing director and one of the founders of Pampa Talents. And Pampa Talent is a company that I personally know very well because we use them here at Nimdzi Insights. Some of my favorite team members here at Nimdzi Insights are provided via Pampa Talent, and they provide an excellent service and great people. I love our Pampa people. I don't even think of them as Pampa people. I think of them as Nimzonians, right? And I think that's by design, right? So, of course, Angelica, you were the first person that I reached out to when we had this topic come up of globally dispersed teams.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Mario Lane, for the cup, which I love.
Yes, thank you, Mario Lane.
She gave it to me in San Diego, and I love it. We are in winter in Argentina, but today we have a sunny day. It's almost 20 degrees centigrade, so I don't need to wear it, but still, I wanted to wear it for a few minutes so to show the yellow color, which is Nimdzi's color, Pampa color. I see your daughter walking around with a yellow dress. So yellow is trendy.
At least she's wearing a yellow dress. At least she has clothes on. Yes. So
we are lucky today.
Yeah. Sorry, folks. I have my kids home from camp today because I had a doctor's appointment. So if you see munchkins running around, just disregard that. But you mentioned
yellow is trendy.
Yellow is trendy, which takes me to the homepage for Pampa Talents. And before we get into the research, and we are going to be looking at research today, guys. Don't worry, I've got a slide deck queued up for you. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about Pampa Talents. And for those of you at home, you can follow along at www.pampatalents.com.ar is the website. But tell me about Pampa Talents.
Pampa was born. Yes, Pampa Talents. It was born as a unit of another company that we own since almost 20 years, which is a translations company. It started just as a service to clients who wanted to have a team in Argentina, and we decided to help. It was a kind of one-time collaboration, but then it turned into a unit of business, and then into a company. It was so much that in 4 years we made it a company, and it's been Pampa for the last, I would say, 2 years. And Pampa is a company that provides recruiting and hiring services in Argentina. It started to be for localization companies worldwide that wanted to hire in Argentina, but today we have kind of expanded a little bit. It was not one of our objectives, but you have someone from the localization industry who has a nice experience hiring with us, and then he suggests or recommends us to someone else, and someone else is from another industry, and they come to us, and so we ended up, recruiting people for accounting, for a different type of companies. But anyways, the core business of Pampa is recruiting and hiring and providing facilitation services for companies, for localization companies who would like to have teams in Argentina.
So you work with a lot of, and I love that story, and I love stories like that because it's very much Nimdzi's story, just like following the client need. Right? You just start doing something, and you think you're doing one thing. Like when Nimdzi was founded, we thought that we were going to be selling market research. Now we do a lot of market research. I'm not sure how much market research we actually sell, because following the client needs, folks didn't want market research. They wanted a bunch of other stuff. That's why I'm plugging the training sessions that we do, M&A, stuff like that. It turned into something that was much different than what we originally intended. But it sounds like it's growing, even though your base is, you work with a lot of LSPs, you work with client-side folks. And tell me kind of about the profile of people that should reach out to you.
Yeah, mainly LSPs. I would say that 95% of our portfolio is LSPs, based mainly in the US. and they are, they have this growing need of expanding their teams and having people in other geographies where they can have, full coverage of their services and, other type of profiles, talents they can find in their countries. But they are mainly coming from the US, Canada, and Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's always a pain, and this is why we use you, is hiring people. Well, you do the whole thing. You do the recruiting, you do the hiring, you do the training, and all of that stuff, and all of the payroll management.
Yeah, it's kind of customized. It's according to clients' needs. We can offer, a range of services, and they can choose from. It's not a set thing.
Yeah,
but they can say, well, I want this service, but I don't want this one. It's kind of customized.
Yeah, because sometimes I'll have someone in a foreign country. In your case, it would be Argentina. But I'll have someone that I want to hire, but due to local labor laws, and I don't have a company set up there, and I don't want to set up a company there because that's a pain in the butt. I could bring that person and just say, hey, could you hire this person? And then, invoice through me. And I know, hey, any auditors out there, I know it's much more complicated than that, as far as like with the labor laws and all of that stuff. But tell me a little bit about that. What's the risk involved with hiring someone locally and paying them as a freelancer or a contractor? Is that something that people that come to you that they're pretty concerned about? Is it for risk reasons, like they don't want to get in trouble with local labor laws?
One of the reasons is, yes, local labor laws, of course. And it's not only local, the Argentinian laws, but it's also the laws where they live in. Because if companies are based in some of the states in the United States, and if they have someone hired for a long period over X amount of months, they may be requested to give the person the benefits of an employee. So, in order to comply with their own laws and with the local laws where the staff resides, they go for this PEO service, professional employee organization is the type of company we are, in order to be in accordance with the laws of both places.
Yeah, and this PEO, and as I'm consulting different clients here at Nimdzi Insights, I'm kind of surprised by the number of people that have never heard that term before. PEO, Professional Employer Organization, and it's a term that you need to know if you're in the language services industry.
If you're thinking of going global with your teams, yes, you need to know.
Well, and that's what
there are organizations, there are PEOs that are all over the world. And you can hire a PO and have your super.
They're really expensive.
Super expensive.
I've looked at them. Right, they'll charge setup fees, and then they'll charge like 30% of the salary every month.
Wow!
And I don't have that kind of money.
Well, anyways, you can go through a global PO and have all your teams, all your staff around the world hired by this only organization. I know it's expensive. And I'm not so sure about how compliant they are with the local laws of every country where they're hired.
Yeah.
So anyway, but
I've
that's my perception.
often wondered that too. But as the customer, like, let's be real, I don't care if they're compliant. I just care if it's their fault if they get caught. Right? I care about my risk. Right? I'm just being real. Just don't pop your monocles, everybody. But that's the way the world works.
Correct.
But let's go into, we promised some research here. Let's go into looking at some of the research that we've put together. I've tried to organize it into a deck for folks. Now, if you participated in this research over on LinkedIn, then you probably already have this deck because I asked somebody here at Nimdzi to send it out to you, and I hope they did. But if not, or if you're watching this for the first time, then send over an email to info@nimdzi.com or live@nimdzi.com. Just reach out to us, and I can make sure to get a copy of this deck to you. This deck today, we're going to go through a couple things. I'll just give you some background on the study. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of remote work and looking at the data, right? There's not a whole lot of editorialization going on here. That's why Angelica is here with me, so that we can actually talk about it instead of just looking at numbers. But I'll give you a background of the study, look at the importance of remote work, look at the importance of global dispersions and some of the upsides and downsides, and then take a look at some of the specific feedback that we got from different teams. So just looking at the study, this wasn't a large-scale 6-month ongoing study with focus groups. This was a survey-based study that we did of localization professionals. We got people from the client side, people from the vendor side. And we're going to show you the data split by each of those. We're also going to show you the data split by company size as much as possible, and really focus on these two different things, which is the remote work, which is can you work outside of the office, and the global dispersion of it. So let's start getting right into it with the importance of remote work. I'll bring us back up on screen here. And the first question that we want to answer here is, how important is it for a successful localization department to allow for remote team members regardless of their location? So this isn't necessarily saying offshoring. This is just saying not making people come into the office here. And we see on screen here, and for those listening as a podcast at home, I'm going to try my best to describe what's going on here. But we see here red, yellow, and green bars here. The red is an average of all the responses, and then we break it out with the yellow being the language buyers, so client side, and the green being language providers. And my main takeaways from this were the access to remote work opportunities is overwhelmingly seen as important. So that's probably not a news flash to a lot of us that have been around this industry, but here's the data that shows it. And remote workers are especially critical for LSPs. What have you found in terms of this? Because you're working with both LSPs and client-side folks. Would you say, Angelica, that it's more important for LSPs to have a remote workforce, or that work-from-home capability, than the clients?
Well, first of all, say that we don't have buyers in our portfolio, but still, you talk to them, you see them in conferences, and you know what's going on. And I think that the remote...
Someone in your marketing department's kicking you under the table right now, I hope. I was setting you up here.
I'm basically honest.
Clients. Oh, gosh, you honest people annoy me.
I'm basically honest.
All right.
Working from home today is a must. And you know what? We were discussing a few days ago and say it is no longer a benefit. At the beginning, we saw it as a benefit. Well, you can give the employees this benefit. At this point, it's no longer a benefit. It's a way of working. It's a methodology of working. And it's different for each company. And each company implements it the way they can and they like. But it's definitely a retention. It's a retention method, because today, many people who are forced to go back to their offices are leaving their jobs because they don't want to.
Yeah.
So remote today is here to stay, and if you want to retain your staff, and if you want to, you have to think as a new methodology of working, with your teams in a remote way. I think, as you said before, that in the localization industry, for us, it's normal. It's like our standard, because we are naturally multicultural.
Right.
So in order to be multicultural, you need to hire people from different parts of the world, and it would be like almost impossible and unaffordable to hire people in your same place from different cultures. So you need to trust and to think, outside the box and go to the world to look for your resources. So in the localization industry, it's kind of, at least for some positions, is like the normal thing. What I'm seeing in the localization industry as a change, as a changing paradigm, is that they are turning more into going remote with positions that didn't used to be remote, like admin, finance, and mainly PMs. Those areas are most sensitive to the company, and that you have to trust the employees you have, because the information they handle is super important. In the past, the companies used to have them sitting in their offices, and today they had to admit that they need to go remote if they want to keep it, or if they want to look for new people who weren't accessible before.
And that's a good point, because I think we've been offshoring for a long time. We've realized and accepted that we can offshore like low skill tasks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the offshoring strategy. of LSPs as well, but they'd want to keep their thought leadership and strategy back home in the home office. And more I'm seeing, I agree, I'm seeing the exact same thing. Nimdzi, eventually, I'm going to have to admit that Nimdzi is not an American company anymore. We have a CEO in the Czech Republic, a COO in the Czech Republic, chief sales officer in Spain. Finance is still here. But yeah, we're all over the place to the point where I don't even realize it anymore. And that would have been weird, I think, 5 years ago. Because
definitely, yes.
5 years ago, we would want those key positions back home.
Right? You know, the pandemic was like opening your eyes to a new reality, right? And discovering that you have so many chances. And that's a positive way of seeing the pandemic.
Yeah, that's
definitely, yes. We have something.
You always have to be careful about like making statements that could be seen as like, I've profited off of the pandemic, because no, I'm not trying to say I'm profiting off of the pandemic.
No.
But I do believe that I heard a quote the other day, maybe it was you that I was talking to, that basically said like the pandemic didn't make anything new happen. What the pandemic did was it accelerated things that were already going to happen. Just instead of 10 years from now, they're happening today.
Today, right? Correct.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was opening the eyes to a new reality, and being forced to do things that maybe you were postponing or not even thinking of,
right? And
say, well, I have to do it now this way, and then why not? And then after the pandemic is almost gone, or we are almost back to normal, say, why not? Why not? This is a new opportunity. So yes, I've seen localization companies coming to me saying, we need a CEO or a COO, and we are ready to jump in Argentina and find it there. So it's super interesting. And they are trusting, you know, as you said before, they are going global, and they are trusting their most executive positions to people who are not in the same place where they are.
Well, because they're smart people all over the world, right? And I think we're starting to realize that. And, you know, and how much does cost play a factor in companies' decisions to outsource to? Now, I know Argentina is not exactly the low-cost labor pool that it used to be. I mean, it's still, relatively speaking, doing pretty well on the market. But how much of a factor do you see that? Is because cost used to be like the reason to outsource, to offshore to India, to China.
The only one, yeah.
It was the reason. And what you're saying is there's all of these other reasons that people are realizing these days. Does cost still play a role?
It does. Yeah, it still does. Definitely,
it always
yes.
will. I mean, money's always going to play a role. It's just
money is always money. Right? This is business.
Yeah.
So money is always present. But I see the lack of talent in some of the areas where companies are at. Is one of the reasons why they're coming to Argentina to look for talent that they don't have available in their regions. Cost is definitely another reason. And I think there is also something like tempting, like an opportunity saying, well, I have this is new, I can discover a diamond, you know? And maybe it's not a proved talent, but it's someone who, apart from the academic background that they may have, or the experience they may have, it's also checking for someone who may have different skills, you know, and a different work culture coming from other countries where they expect more involvement, more commitment, someone who has like different ideas, thinking outside the box, giving different solutions according to their experience in the past in their countries. You know, checking. I think they're also looking for something like, apart from cost and from talent. I mean, talent meaning academic background or experience.
As what I'm hearing you talk about is, in a word, diversity. right?
Right.
And I think HR
Exactly.
managers fall into this trap of thinking of diversity as just being racial, ethnic, whatever, nationality diversity. But alongside with that, related to that, perhaps not completely separate from it, but related to that is this diversity of thought, diversity of ways of approaching problems, diversity
Definitely.
of culture, and ways of dealing with intercultural and interpersonal challenges in the workforce. And that's a big part of it. It's like we need women in our leadership positions, and just using an example for diversity and inclusion, right? We need women because women, in general, approach problems a little bit different than men do. We need people from different cultures in leadership positions because they're going to slap us and say, "This is." I'm getting inundated with fruit chews here. Yeah, so I'm gonna.
They see things from a different perspective.
Right.
They may have different approaches. They may have different ideas or solutions to problems. So it's super interesting. This diversity is super interesting, and it's super interesting that a company may have this approach because if, as a company, you are also thinking of approaching international clients, you may
Right.
have
Right.
different ways of approaching that client that may be brought or considered by someone who is from the same nationality or region in the world. So yeah, I see many reasons why people are coming. When I say coming to Argentina, is the only panorama I may see because I'm based in Argentina and I sell talents in Argentina. But I think it's happening the same with other markets around the world.
Oh yeah. Well, and
Eastern Europe.
there's markets that like we all know of that like good luck selling in Japan if you don't
Right.
have a Japanese team, right? I mean, you can try, but I mean, there's markets out there that are just hard to penetrate unless you approach them in a very specific way or have a local connection involved,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
This kind of brings us to you sent me this article not too long ago. Boom de argentinos que trabajan para el exterior en forma remota, puestos más buscados y cuánto cobran en dólares.
This was published by
What?
Infobae.
What?
Infobae.
Yeah, explain this to me. Walk us through this because not everybody. I'm not saying me. My Spanish is perfecto, but
Absolutely.
not everybody listening speaks Spanish. So
Okay, I'll explain. This was an article published 2 days ago in a newspaper, in an Argentinian newspaper, and talks about this boom of companies coming to Argentina looking for talents. And it said that before, I mean, from the pandemic until now, in a couple of years, the amount of professionals that have been hired by international companies or by foreign companies grew by almost 200%. Super interesting. I mean, this is not new. The word talents hired before the pandemic, but it's growing, it's accelerating. With the pandemic has accelerated. And then says that one important thing, one highlight that I got is the most required positions. System
okay,
engineers, developers, program developers, then surplace interpreters, and then psychologists. This is
psychologist.
according to psychologists. This is according to Deal, which is a consultancy firm in Argentina. Yeah, yeah. You
Interesting.
may have your psychologist
I could
going,
use a psychologist or
online.
two. Trust me. Maybe I need
You
to.
can you can
Do you
happen
provide
online and have a
psychologists at Pampa Talent? Can
No,
you
I
give
mean
me a head shrinker?
we have a psychologist in the team. She
Okay.
she recruits and she does the interviews. But I should recommend Ornella to you. She's brilliant.
I might reach out to you after that. I need a psychologist. My team members need anybody that works with me probably needs a psychologist too. Someone with a prescription pad, more likely. Let's. So we talked a little bit, and I realize I'm just unexpected. Well, not as I probably should have expected. Just getting into the conversation with you because that's what's interesting. But I did promise data here, so we
Yes.
looked at the remote work. We didn't look at this, but I'm kind of going to skip over it because it's kind of two ways of looking at the same thing. So we looked at the breakdown between client side and vendor side, and these kids know that if they get me while I'm busy, and they put fruit snacks in front of me, they know that I have no choice but to open them. So I have smart kids. The breakdown between vendor side, client side, and also the breakdown between larger teams and smaller teams. And not a lot of difference there for the larger team versus smaller team. But let's go and look at the global dispersion, which is related to remote work. I mean, you have to be remote to be globally dispersed. Well, I guess you don't have to. You could have offices in multiple countries. But I think this is something that we kind of take for granted in the language services industry because we're global by design, right?
Right.
I think isn't that a Natalie Kelly book, Global by Design? That's something. But
It sounds nice.
What's that?
Sounds nice.
Yeah.
Global design.
I think
could
that's
be a
Natalie.
name.
I think I stole that from
The
Natalie
name
Kelly.
of our next company.
Yeah. Well, we'll make sure it's not trademarked. And kind of the same thing here with language services providers reporting it to be much more important than the actual language services buyers. And what I take away from that, and just not to bury the lead here, not a lot of difference between large companies and small companies, but my kind of takeaway from that is this is the value, or one of the ways that LSPs provide value is by providing that global workforce to the clients. The clients don't have to go out and hire team members all over the world. They can hire one LSP and they can get their international needs met that way.
That's the way the supply chain of our industry works, right?
Right.
But I always think, going global and discovering that you can hire anywhere and doesn't have pose like a risk to the usual supply chain, the one we are used to. There will be some kind of disintermediation in the future due to this reason. Who's going to be out? Those are questions that sometimes I think it's going to happen. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I'm just thinking you bring up this word risk, right? And that to me is a big part of, because I've worked at a lot of LSPs not a lot of LSPs, but I've worked at LSPs where we do provide staffing or managed services, and I don't want to get into the difference between staffing and managed services because there's a lot of bullshit in there, but we provide workforce solutions, right? We provide a talent, like Pampa Talent provides talent. And one of the main reasons I found that clients wanted us to provide that is because, and they use us as an LSP because they already had a P open, right? They didn't have to get a new purchase order, so it was just convenient. And it really reduced their risk. Because if I'm on the client side and I hire, let's just say linguists, so let's not even talk about project management. Let's just say a linguist. And I hire a linguist to be my lead linguist, country manager, whatever it's going to be. And what happens if that person sucks, right? And it takes me 3 months to figure out that they're just not a good, I shouldn't say sucks. What happens if they turn out not to be a good fit, right? Well, it takes me 3 months to figure that out. And then I got to go through this brutal HR process in order to offload them, right? Now, if I hire someone through my LSP, I can just call my LSP account manager and say, look, this person's not working out. Give me someone else. And usually there's going to be SLAs. And tell me about SLAs, service level agreements that you have with your clients. Like, what happens when you're providing a talent, let's say a project manager, to an LSP, and the LSP calls you and says, you know what, this person, they're nice, but they're not really working for us. What can you do about that? What does that process look like?
Well, sometimes it happens. And when it happens, if it is before 3 months, during the first 3 months of the contract, it's pretty easy. If it happens afterwards, it's a little more complex and may cost a little bit more money. But in general, we try to avoid it by a very hard selection process.
Okay.
With a lot of steps and interviews and reference checks and tests, everything to make sure that the person is a good fit for the company, that will stay, and that the company will be happy and the person will be also happy, because that's also important. But if it does happen, then we try to figure out that before the 3 months period ends, so we have time to terminate the person and find a new one.
Yeah, and
sometimes finding a new one is at no cost. I mean, if it is within the first 3 months, it has no cost.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to like put you on the spot saying like what happens when you screw up so often, because the reason I have to ask is because we've never had that. Like we've been using your guys' services, your gals' services for years, and we've never been in a position where we've had to do that.
In general, it never happens. It's very rare, I'll say.
Well, you talk about the vetting process, the recruiting and the vetting process and the testing process. What do you do? How do you test if someone's going to be a good project manager?
I'm
bad at this. Like our CEO here at Nimdzi, Joseph Kubovsky, he's an excellent hiring manager. And I will sing his praises because he's really good at interviewing and sniffing out the good talent and all of that stuff. I'm not. I'm lazy. I hire you if I like you, and then I figure it out from there. And that's gotten me into a lot of trouble before. So, like, honest question, how do you find good people, and how do you separate the wheat from the chaff?
Well, first of all, there's a CV selection that is very thorough, I'll say. Reading every CV from bottom to top, and then, checking everything, trying to discover if they're lying is very important. Seeing the dates when they work for certain companies, and then checking references, and then seeing if someone was jumping from one company to the other, in short periods. Everything is important. From the way they present the information, they write it, if it is orderly, everything is important. I have kind of an intuition, I say, that I developed along the years that I've been doing this. And, at the beginning I had a hard time, but now I can tell, from, in a minute, I can say if someone is a good fit or not. And in general, I kind of match with my clients when they decide. I see the 3 profiles we are going to submit, and I say this has more opportunities. And in general, I'm right. But then we also work with tests. Tests could be psychological, could be writing, communication, could be typing to see if they type fast. Any type of tests. And it's kind of...
You can't take it for granted. Things that, because like everyone says on their CV, excellent communication skills and experience with Microsoft Office. Well, it's like, all right, are you experienced with Microsoft Office? Like, make me a spreadsheet. Write me some
Exactly.
formulas.
Let's work with dynamic tables.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've hired some people that we said excellent Excel skills. And I'm like, oh, honey, I don't think your Excel skills, the way that you define those are the same as I define those.
Exactly. Those type of very particular technical tests are usually decided and defined with the client. Yep. To see what they want, what they use in general, what they do at work. And, but then the psychological ones are, usually defined by us, and then checking references, and then asking for police records in Argentina to see that they are clean. You
never know.
Yeah.
You never know, right?
You never know. And what we are handling with a lot of confidential information in the localization industry. So it's very important to check that they don't have criminal records because of confidentiality reasons, mainly. We go through different steps. There are several interviews. In general, we have one with Ornella, maybe a second one with me, one the recruiter, then me, and then with the client. And the client may have more than one. Maybe the recruiter, maybe some of the HR department, maybe someone from the technical area where this person is going to work, namely project management or whatever area is going to work with. And then maybe one final one with a CEO or something like that, someone who's making the final decision. Everything is important. I mean, every step and every measure we take to make sure that we are hiring the right person is important. We don't want to, we don't want turnover. We don't want to. We don't want termination. We don't want to quitting.
It's not good for anybody.
We want to make sure that there's the right fit and it's going to stay long in the position.
Let's go to the chat here. Will the chat work for me today? No, of course it won't work. Come on, chat.
No chat.
Where are you, chat? Well, it doesn't matter. I can pull it up on my phone here. Let's see if there's any questions in here. Paulo Guimares says, even with this accelerated environment for global teams, there are places that do not keep up with this change. For example, Brazilian regulations regarding the workforce working overseas are still very restricted. You know,
Paulo is from Brazil. Paulo Guimarães.
I can tell by the
Okay,
funny
yeah. Well, it
symbol
depends
over the R or the A in his name.
it
Thanks.
depends, yeah, on every country, the regulations are different in every country.
Yeah. Launa, I thought I saw a question here. Launa Santos. The first question we are asked when in an interview is the location we are at, even for remote work. If location is not a thing anymore for our industry, why is it still a topic for interviewers and managers? Good question, right? Good question. Why, how long, here's a way of putting it. Ask the expert here, asking, meaning you. How long until that becomes a completely irrelevant interview question to ask, where employers stop caring completely about where you're geographically located in the world?
I don't think it's irrelevant. I'm sorry. Who was the person? I forgot the name.
This was,
Santos.
throwing some shade at Launa
Santos, something.
Santos.
Okay, I'm not sure that it's irrelevant. I think for the time being, it's very important. Why? First of all,
Yeah,
if
why?
you're having,
This is
if you're
the devil's in
having,
the details.
if you have a plan of expansion where you want to have a global team so as to cover 24/7 your customers, your operations, you need to know what the person is, because you need to require this person to work in regular normal hours and not overnight. So if you're planning this 24/7 around the clock operation, you need to have people, in different time zones. So it's important to know where they live. I mean, they might be living in China and they will work overnight and they will cover Europe or whatever, or America, but it's not the ideal thing if you want to have your staff happy and having, living a normal life.
Because I've had that before. I've had folks in Central Europe, teams that were working a U.S. time zone, and I've had folks in South America, in Argentina, which is about 4 hours ahead of me.
Yeah.
4 to 6, I think. I don't know.
It depends on the time of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, now it's 4.
So yeah, I've had folks in Argentina that were working a U.S. time zone. And in theory, I think it sounds great, but in practice, I just don't see it as long-term sustainable, right?
It's not sustainable.
You can't do that for a long time, because people
it has a lot of turnover.
And go home and kiss their kids and go to soccer practice and stuff like that.
Exactly.
It can work for very specific situations. If someone like already lives that kind of lifestyle anyways, and they prefer to work at night, but
yeah, but it's not standard. It's not that you are going to have, that you will find 50 people in the same in the same place for the same position that they would like to work overnight.
Exactly.
So you better have this. You always, when you hire staff, it's different if you're hiring freelancers or whatever. But when you hire staff, you need to think of the well-being of your people too.
Right.
And in that sense, because they are part of your team, even though they are hired by a different company like Pampa does, we hire for other companies, but still, you have to think of the well-being of your staff, because after all, they are part of your team. So you need to, care for their work-life balance and for their, mental health and everything. So it's important to offer them, nice work opportunities like the schedule.
Well, and also people will agree to things to get hired that they know. Maybe they don't even know. Maybe they think like, oh, this will be fine. I can work late hours.
Yeah, I will be able to. Yeah. But then they find that they cannot.
So back to the deck here. I'm skipping through this deck, guys. If you want the deck, reach out. I'll send it to you. Sorry. But I think the conversation is much more interesting than just looking at slides. So I'll show you so we have it broken down here by what is most important to LSBs, that's language services buyers, what is most important to LSPs, language services providers. We look at some of the downsides and the upsides. So what are the downsides? What are the upsides to having remote teams, having globally dispersed teams? I'm just giving you guys a preview. Same thing. Breaking it out by remote work versus global dispersion. And then what's really interesting in this deck is this verbatim feedback that we've collected. And these are like actual comments from actual people, actual professionals working in the industry. So, people working, and I sorted out by like, do they work for an LSP? Do they or do they work for a buyer? And what is the size of their team, so that you can kind of get an idea of who's providing this different feedback. Super interesting stuff. I'll tell you what, don't spam. I told you before to reach out to info@nimdzi.com if you want a copy of the deck. Don't spam us. Just leave a comment and we'll go through. And no, here's what we'll do. I'm going to post this deck publicly on Nimdzi's homepage as a post, so that you guys can just go and grab it. That way my poor marketing team doesn't have to respond to all of it. And yeah, so I just wanted to go through the rest of the deck here with you before coming back to what's important, because we need to start wrapping this up here, Angelica. I thank you for all of the great work that you guys are doing with Nimdzi. You're not just some random company that I'm having on as a guest here. We consider you guys true partners in crime here, and you've really allowed
partners in hiring.
Partners in hiring. Well, the lines between hiring and crime can. That's great, Gary. Go play with that ball somewhere else. We truly wouldn't have been able to done the things that we've done without the help that we're receiving from our Pampas team members. So I thank you very much for that. Any closing thoughts? Any takeaways that you'd like to leave our audience with here?
You know what? You are thanking Pampa, but in fact, we are thanking Argentina. We are very proud of our country. Our country is going through hard times now, financially and a few other things, political. But we have great people in our country. We have great talent. University is free in Argentina, so whoever wants may have the chance to go to university and study and have an academic career. And we are delighted to offer the world the great talent we have here, because it's not only academically trained, but it's also nice people, committed, responsible. We love our country, and we love our people, our citizens, and we are delighted to offer them to the world, that we can show that we can, that we can provide excellent service. So Pampa is just a channel to allow these people to go and work for the world and provide services and prove that they can shine. So having said that, thank you so much for inviting me, for inviting us. I have a partner that is Virginia, that's sitting here next to me. Can you hear her?
Hi, Virginia.
There she is.
she was on last time. I had you guys on before. You're in the repeat guest club now. It's a very exclusive club. So we'll get Virginia back on here sometime so she can join us in the repeat guest club.
We will bring her back. Yes, definitely, right. Yes. We thank you, Nimdzi, for staying with us. Renato's always have a nice word for us, for nice advice. You're always available when we need. We are great partners, so we really appreciate that, and thank you for inviting me here. You're always welcome to Argentina when you want to visit, so as to visit your staff and
I get too much trouble down in Argentina.
Yes, you're always welcome.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. So thank you. I hope to start traveling again soon. I hope to start traveling. It's for many reasons, the pandemic being one of them. I haven't been able to travel a whole lot recently, but Argentina is definitely back on my list. I love it down there. I absolutely love it down there.
You're super welcome when you want to come. And happy to be serving multilingual too. Great publication. We need it. The industry need it, and it has changed a lot. And I know that the Argentinian team has been working on that change, on that renewal, on that renovation.
That renovation is this is just becoming a love fest now. But that rebranding that we've gone through, if you like the look and feel of what Multilingual Magazine has been doing within the last 18 months, this lady, right? These guys.
Great work.
So that's been a joint effort. But yeah, before we start just getting too gushy here, thank you, Angelica. I'm going to take us out here. So, ladies, gentlemen, if you enjoyed this Nimdzi Live experience, then join us next time on next week. I don't know when that's going to be. But next week I'm talking to Anmai, Amir Kazlan, Achim Ruop, and we're looking at the latest results. The quality results are in on the performance of data-enhanced machine translation, which is this really interesting product from, or service product from Taos. We've had them on before. I talked to Jaap Vandermeer when they were first starting to roll out DEMT, Data Enhanced Machine Translation. Now let's see how it's performing. We're going to be talking about that next week. So you can go over to LinkedIn.com and LinkedIn and Nimdzi's page and sign up to attend that event now so they'll be notified when we go live. Finally, once again, my name is Tucker Johnson. I appreciate my guest, Angelica. I appreciate Nimdzi researchers who are working hard behind the scenes so that I get to do fun stuff like this. I appreciate all of you guys out there in the industry that are responding and participating in industry research so that we can all learn from each other. If you'd like to do that, nimdzi.com/participate is how you go about doing that. And lastly, I appreciate you guys in the audience, but especially those participating over here in chat and keeping it lively and really taking full advantage of this live format. So with that, I'm signing off. I'm taking a 3-day weekend, and I'll be back next week with Anmai and team to talk about data enhanced machine translation. Until then, ciao.